Hello, everyone, and welcome to a growing Spotlight on Silence episode. The Armenian Center for Political Rights, Քաղաքական իրավունքների հայկական կենտրոն, the ACPR, has released a number of important reports. There was one in November, and just recently again, a week ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, they highlight a lot of systematic, egregious violations of citizens' legal and constitutional rights, not to mention the absolute trashing of religious freedom in the country by Pashinyan's government. These reports are our topic today, as we have with us Rafael Ishkhanyan, a lawyer specializing in human rights and freedom of expression in Armenia. The links to the reports and the ACPR page on Facebook, as well as referenced article, will all be in our show notes at podcasts.groom.org/episode number. It's important that you check them out, and please join, like, and follow the ACPR Facebook page. Browse the reports that they've posted, and it's important to let them know how critical we think that their work is for democracy and human rights in Armenia. Hovig, we do these spotlights just a little too infrequently. The last one we did was June 2025, while these issues on human rights violations and the trampling of democratic norms in Armenia have just become kind of a daily feature in Armenia now.
Yeah, I think unfortunately this is a combination of factors, including us being stretched too thin, ACPR experts being stretched too thin, and just being too many fires to address at the same time. But I think that one way that our viewers and listeners can find ways to ramp up our voices and help us increase our scale and reach is to go to podcast.groom.org/donate and help us financially. Also, you should always like, comment, and share this content, and make sure you're subscribed, especially if you find the content interesting and if you're listening to us now. All right, on with the show.
Welcome back to the Groom Podcast, Rafael.
Ողջույն, Rafael John.
Hello, Hovik. Hello, Osped. Nice seeing you again.
We have a number of topics to talk about, but we want to start with the case of the Imnemnimi podcasters from Antifake, because it, to me, it captures the mechanics of repression in today's Armenia better than almost anything else. The two podcasters were arrested not once, but twice for words spoken out on a political show people chose to watch. Insult, which is no longer a crime in Armenia, was repackaged as online hooliganism. Their equipment was seized, their newsroom was crippled, and the message was simple: keep talking, and this is what happens. So as we mentioned, these two same podcasters, Narek Samsonyan and Vazgen Saratelian, were detained in March 2024. Charges were filed against them, and after serving pretrial detention for months, they were eventually released, and in May 2025, they were acquitted. But that didn't stop the authorities from bringing the same exact charge and again imposing pretrial detention as a preventive measure. So, Rafael, your organization, ACPR, Armenian Center for Political Rights, has published a statement, and we will link it in our show notes, about this incident. Can you tell us more from your perspective what happened?
Yeah, you're right. Now we are dealing with let's say, a rare case of recurring persecution, let's say, because, as you mentioned, the article involved is so-called hooliganism. I mean, we call it the circumvention of the decriminalization of insults. And by the way, this is not the only way that the authorities are doing. They also use some other techniques in other situations. We'll see when we discuss the lawyer's case. In contrast to the last year's same circumstances that were there, we saw one more level of the, let's say, of one more shade to the persecution, is that in the current situation, the person from the ruling party that was, let's say, the one who benefited this was Alen Simonyan, basically the Speaker of the Parliament. Let's say the second, or not the first one in charge. It was not the very top, but now we have other people in power who may also benefit from this circumvention of the legal system and basically using the charges that absolutely have nothing to do with insults directly targeted towards a person, which, by the way, was an answer to the similar insult which was provoked by Alan, I think the same day or the day before. So this is one of the differences. The second one, let's say for some the people would expect that, okay, let's say once it happened, maybe the first judge who gave the pretrial detention, the first case was wrong, maybe it was too much pressure. But as you said, we have their case closed, they were acquitted, and now as some other judge sees the exact same charge brought against same people. So we would think that it should be, in a negative scale, so much, needed for the other judge to go to the same path. Of course, as a professional judge, knowing that this charge would be dropped eventually, they would be acquitted eventually, but it just becomes so easy just with a mark of a pen to deny freedom for journalists, for podcasters, without even thinking about this. So this is very alarming, of course. One thing that we ask people to pay attention to once and for all close this topic of hooliganism, so-called thing, is that this is a very old, let's say, outdated type of charge. For many people, when we try to explain what it is, people don't even understand. Say, okay, what it is. It says, the overtly respectful attitude towards society. What is that even? If you go to this path, maybe someone would argue that any type of punk music is an act of hooliganism itself. So those people will be, charged if they even live in Armenia, let's say, if they, I don't know, play their music in one of the concerts, because in some punk music, there's some, disrespectful attitude towards the society, whatever that would mean.
Absolutely. I'm thinking the equivalent in the United States of, let's say, rap music.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, because the only act that was labeled as such was use, and sometimes it's just a use of a single insulting word, single use of profanity, which I think it's abundant in some songs. Maybe if let's say if you look into this way of operation of this law, if you put some rap music, let's say, or punk music, which has F word in, if it becomes available to the third person, with this logic, you can say they committed act of hooliganism. So they have and if you bring them to the judge for the pretrial detention, if we take into account the example we have, they may be put in prison for that, which is absurd, of course. For the hooliganism to be the case, this should be the motive, this should be the goal, the aim of a person, that their aim was not use of the insults or profanity, but the goal was to show their disrespect. So if you look closely to how it's written, how the cassation court interpreted this obscure, let's say, charge, is that, again, this respect, the show of disrespect should be the aim of the, let's say, hooligan, not the use of profanity. So just back to our case, we stressed that last year, and now the Narek and Vazgen included in their podcast from the beginning, they have a disclaimer. It clearly says, and I counted, it goes for more than half a minute. It clearly shows that in this podcast, we may use some very extreme wording. Sometimes some people may find it disturbing. There may be some use of profanity if the case is such. So if anyone doesn't want to hear that because they will be feel this disrespect, yeah, of course you can just switch off. That's your choice. You've been warned. I mean, there was no surprise to that. Same was the case last year. They didn't put the disclaimer in the beginning, but they put a disclaimer in the chapter, and also they said that now it's 18 plus. That means mature content. So anyone who is who may be offended, please turn off your screen, or the stream. And then went on saying what they did say and what eventually they were acquitted of. Now we have the same situation, even a clearer case. So it's not even a debate about the persecution, what was the motives of let's see how the trial goes. No, it's just a very easy textbook example. You can give it to the first grade law students. Please look into this. Is there a violation of law here, like from the side of the state? I don't think that even the worst students would go and say no. It's just so plain.
I'm in shock because, of course, I know about this, but when I think about hooliganism, I think about a bunch of people on the street fighting and beating each other up. We're talking about online hooliganism. What would be the components that the government would have to prove for this to go forward? I mean, I believe the law says that you have to, it was hooliganism and it was done with the use of insults, which is apparently in the law explicitly makes it more aggravated. I'm not sure. And I can't even believe we're talking about disclaimers that just to exercise free speech, they have to use disclaimers. I don't think even that should be necessary. Should we use disclaimers for our show if I want to call Alan like I don't know, some not very nice words. I'm not sure so I saw your report. I saw you mention a disclaimer. I think that it's good to mention it, but I think that when that is people default to that as a main argument, I don't think that we should rely on just a disclaimer offering protection.
Yes, you're right. And we somehow feel, ashamed that we have to record to that. We have to, the idea is that the prosecution should prove the guilt of a person, but we're in a situation where actively proving the innocence. But we have what we have. So that's why we put so much, we underline this thing that they put the disclaimer. So just rule out any hooliganism. We don't even go further, because if we go further, what does it? Yeah, you're right. What does it mean, online hooliganism? Well, if you go into the criminal code of Armenia, you will see some remnants from the old times. And for some people, especially in US, where the free speech is of a different quality, let's say. I'm not a big fan of all the legal system, but what comes to free speech, I think the US has one of the greatest standards, well, at least on paper. And it will be very difficult to even explain why we have this kind of issue here. This can be. You're right. The hooliganism, initially, it was the act, when some people, during the Tsardom or Soviet Union, some sort of antisocial elements would engage in streets, being drunk or being very antisocial. They will use profanity. They will, be quite of stress for the passersby. And this was basically what the hooliganism was. They include the aggravated circumstance if it's done through the use of telecommunications. Well, the only scenario we were thinking about this in ACPR and what we can come up with is, let's imagine some reporter for the, news reporter is reporting from someplace, I don't know, a venue, which is, let's say there's a protest going on. So they have the live camera pointed at protesters, the journalists talking their microphone, and so one guy comes and makes this sort of a video bomb and starts to use extreme, profanity against everyone, asking the operator, point at me, and I'm going to say this and that, very profane and obscene wording. This might be, let's say, something to discuss as a hooliganism using telecommunications. Because if we are going into the targeted use of insults, which are part of the political discourse, of course, and I want to stress one more time, in both cases, these guys were answering to the insults which were voiced earlier. First time by Nicole, second time by Alan Simonyan. If we think that this is if you label it as hooliganism, and any of such cases of any stream, of any blog, any podcast whatsoever, if they use any insult, we should charge them. I think the Armenian investigation service should spend the next couple of millennia just investigating the cases of Vartan Ghukasyan, the guy from the dog party, because in every video there was at least several cases of online hooliganism, saying in quotes, of course, because this is absurd.
Yeah, Rafael, if this is not political retaliation or suppression of free speech, then why seize microphones, cameras, and even tripod? I believe that all of the essentially the anything that could be confused for equipment was taken by the national security services.
Yeah, but there's no other answer. It was just a pretext. So we're thinking that one, anti-fake is one of the core, let's say, opposition-oriented medias here, which made its name by itself. And of course, if we even think, let's say, just imagine for one moment that whatever they did was a crime and they should be persecuted. All the materials of the case are the video stream, and that's it. There's nothing else because we're discussing what they said during the stream. So the investigation doesn't need absolutely anything besides having an access to YouTube on their computer in their office, and they can do the investigation. And seizing, yeah, even the tripod. So that means, you can't find anything on a tripod. But fingerprints of whom? So absolutely, this is just a overt, persecution against media. This is an overt
Kafkaesque, to be
pressure
honest, yeah.
on free speech. Yes, and the only reason that can come up with any sane person is this was done to obstruct the activity of this media, of anti-fake TV.
Well, next time I have a tripod with me, I'm going to be very careful. But the so-called Velvet Revolution, Rafael, in reality, in our opinion, a seizure of power or a coup, came as a result of built-up hate against the formers by the people who claimed to be liberal and democratic and essentially came in their place. The same hated formers who decriminalized insults to begin with. Do you remember a time before 2018 when this same tactic, which is abhorrent in my opinion, the packaging of free speech as hooliganism in order to jail someone, was used by the regime? I mean, at least leading up to 2018, maybe sometime in 1990s this happened. I'm not sure, but um, i- is it just that we have selective memory? What can you say about that?
The short answer, I'd say no. Uh, and before the decriminalization, actually, Nikol Pashinyan was one of the people who went through it, who was also criminally charged when it was in the criminal code in early 2000s. And at that time, it mostly would, I think, it would be concerned to the sort of printed media because the lack of the internet was not available at the moment, and for the opposition, the accessible media was the printed media. There were cases before the decriminalization that people were charged with the insults in a criminal sense. But I think it was, I don't remember the date, but it was in early 2000s when it was decriminalized. And in my memory, I don't have any case similar to this one. That is just for the sake of insults, a person being dragged in front of the cameras, ashamed in this shameful way by the masked policeman, whatever, put in a pretrial detention for the words. There were different things, of course, which are still exist today. But this is, I say, an innovation which this current government brought with them. They try to circumvent the decriminalization with any possible way. This is not the only one, actually. They do the same when they use the charge against one of the lawyers was detained last month. They use the same when they are trying to interpret the hate speech laws, because they put aside the protected characteristic part, which is the most important part of what we call hate speech or hate crime laws. And they only live with the insults directed towards one of the ruling party, members. And they're saying, well, this was a call for, I don't know, public call for violence or incitement of intolerance whatsoever, which in reality was just an insult targeted towards a specific person, which has legal remedy for that. They should go to the civil court, file a case, and demand for, the so-called non-material, non-pecuniary damage. And that's it. No one should go to jail for that. This is what's written in the law. But well, as we discussed, they try to circumvent it with many ways. And online hooliganism is one aspect, but this is used at the moment for this. The Vazgen and Narek's cases are not the only one, but they are the most prominent ones at the moment.
Rafael, let's take a look at the cases of the two lawyers arrested in November, which you mentioned, which show that even the legal profession is no longer protected if it's defending people that the government is targeting. One of them, the first one, was lawyer Alexander Kochubaev, I believe. He wrote a harsh Facebook post criticizing judges and prosecutors over church-related cases, and for that he was violently detained and jailed under a criminal article that has nothing to do with insults. And then another lawyer, Ruben Mkhitaryan, was arrested for being present as a lawyer at a protest outside Gyumri City Hall, where he was negotiating with the police and raising his hands. Yet he was falsely charged, as the ACPR report states, with mass disorder and interference with justice, despite the video evidence showing that he committed any kind of unknown violence. For our listeners, I just want to remind that we are going to put all these ACPR statement links into our show notes at podcast.grung.org/episode number. So please go and check them out. It's important that you check out these documents. Rafael, what legal standards were used to justify criminal charges against these two lawyers?
Just one more remark before we get to the lawyers' cases is that I think you saw that the platform to promote the protection of journalists and I think safety of journalists. This is the Council of Europe platform. So they issued a statement and they included the Narex and Svazgen's Imnemnimi case in their statement, where they basically raised some the issue before the Armenian government. With the same, we mentioned in our discussion, the seizure of the equipment, the lack of legal basis whatsoever. One thing I think should, which is for some, which is a quite, a shocking, let's say, it would be a shocking discovery if people go to the website, this platform's website. So they have listed the number of detained journalists in the European area. And if you look into the Council of Europe states, at this moment, Armenia is in the third place with number of detained journalists. So the higher numbers are only in Turkey and Azerbaijan. This is just one thing. I mean, now we got in top charts in one criteria, which is quite disturbing. The number of journalists detained. It's higher than in Georgia. It's higher than in any other Council of Europe state. There, you can see that there's Russia, Belarus, but they are not part of this organization. And the cases of Ukraine are basically those who were detained in the part where there is Russian forces currently. So
I think that this is an interesting report, and the source of the threat, like they have a categorization of threats. This is level 1 threat, which is the most serious. They have categorized, but the language I found a little bit too diplomatic. They say we request for you to reevaluate the case and things like that. Whereas, for instance, if this was in Russia, I think I would see stronger language, like we strongly reject. This is a brutal violation of human rights. So I think even in terms of EU bodies responding, there is a little bit of a soft pillow, that is used when approaching this. And in any case, I'm glad that you brought this up. We will also include the link to this COE, Council of Europe platform. I think it's Platform for Protection of Journalism, I believe, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that report, we will also include that report in the show notes.
Yeah, the lawyers. So during the ACPR's annual event, we put the name for this session as "Who would protect those who protect us?" So who will defend the defense? Because this kind of charges against lawyers and happening in a very short period, one after another. For us, it was another, let's say, a cold shower, in terms that again, those charges are not, the type that you can debate. You can have the, this struggle of opinions because, well, maybe, there's something, it depends how to interpret the situation, because there's absolutely no interpretation. As you mentioned in Ruben Mkhitaryan's case, there was just absolutely nothing. This is the very, classical way of build up case. Just I don't even know where to start. We just went through all the type of recordings of different angles, starting from the moment when he was far from the protest place, showing that there's something happening there, a scuffle, whatever, and trying to approach there. And we have his every move shot on cameras, different cameras from different angles. We're trying to, again, as I said, trying to prove his innocence. His lawyers, us, and this is the absurd that we got, this absurd situation that we are dealing
But
now
so
is
how do the
yeah,
prosecutors explain the gap between what they are charging with and then the publicly available evidence? It just doesn't make any sense.
absolutely. And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know that during the hearing for the pretrial detention, the lawyer said they were just doing absurd things in the sense that there was nothing. There was just no evidence, no, nothing incriminating against him. They were saying he was obstructing how it was, the powers of the police officer, whoever was there, and he was participating in a mass riots. There were no mass riots absolutely there. There were dozens of people currently arrested, and I think some of them are in detention. And there was a scuffle because if you look into the videos, yeah, there was a scuffle between police and the protesters. Some threw the plastic bottles or other things. We know that this is not something should be incriminating. We have European Court of Human Rights cases saying that if you throw, this sort of innocent objects, which does not pose any danger, you cannot, qualify it as a grave crime or whatever. This is not a pretext for this for the interventions. Ruben was standing there. Again, several cameras are showing how he was just standing there, doing nothing else but standing there with his hands high, holding his hands high. Probably was trying to communicate with the police because, with the different angle when he was already being brought, he's telling the other camera was pointing at him, look, they are beating someone there. And he's pointing at a case where policemen were beating a person, a protester, and he's showing that there's a violation going on. So basically he was doing what human rights defender would do, even though he himself was being at the moment arrested.
What kind of impact do such activities on the part of the police against lawyers have on all these lawyers, the legal profession, in trying to carry out their duties, their professional duties?
I think if this case stays, without, let's say, due evaluation, let's say, if the state does not issue a statement saying that we were wrong, this is something that we'll look into, that would not occur anymore. Maybe somehow will be more eased, but the chief of investigative committee brought false evidence, that's false statements saying that, well, Ruben was doing some, movements with his hands, which was because no, absolutely was not doing anything. There are 4 objective, evidence pieces, recordings. You cannot manipulate all of those. And please go and try to find others because I think there were more than 4. We just went into this because we thought it's more than enough to show that he was doing absolutely nothing there. So what it would be the effect, the chilling effect? Of course, we were thinking at the moment where the protests were happening. I myself, when I was being an observer, many times I was standing in a line where there's, this contact line between protesters and police. Why? Because if there's something happens, this is the place. And if I have to document what is happening there, this is the place where I should look, when I should take photos, videos, or whatever. Now, let's say I will be, I will think twice doing that because maybe I will be brought, maybe I will be charged, because I don't need to do absolutely anything, even more something illegal. I don't have to do absolutely anything to be charged with such absurd, cases as Rubens was. And of course, in the end, I will be acquitted, but I will spend the next couple of weeks or month in jail for what?
And in fact, it's not just the lawyers. I mean, just 2 days ago, in the case of Samvel Karapetyan, we will talk more about that later. The expert witness who testified in the case, and he testified that the use of the words "we will get involved in our own way" does not constitute a seizure of state power. As soon as he did that, the investigators raided his home and searched his home. There's a lot of intimidation of professionals, whether it's lawyers or even expert witnesses, to not dare to, defend the targets of government's political persecution. But I think this is a good segue to talk about the next topic on our show, which is actually a big topic. It is a report that your organization, the ACPR, issued earlier in November. It's called Mass Political Persecutions of 2025, May to September. It's more than 50 pages long, so I think that you're right to label it Part A, because I'm sure there will be a lot of material for Part B as these injustices are continuing to take place. So the report goes into the details of major cases from that period, from May to September. Before turning to individual cases, though, we need to explain what this report is and why it exists. The ACPR did not write this report in a vacuum, and it emerged from a growing number of similar cases unfolding at the same time under the same logic. And the report basically asks a basic question: why now? And the repressions by the Pashinyan regime, as you highlight, have only escalated. It's not like they were completely angelic before, but it seems like with every year, and especially now, the repressions escalated. So we ask you, why now, Rafael? Why in 2025?
Yeah, so yeah, we provided this as the way we think the explanation in two parts. So we think there are some domestic reasons for that and some international reasons for that. The domestic reasons is the upcoming elections, of course, because now if you think about that, in many countries, like similar to Armenia, there's one sort of political rule when you have some autocrat sitting on top. This is the gatekeeper of the inner political arena. If you want to get inside, you have to ask this gatekeeper, because otherwise you'll be isolated, you'll be, persecuted, or you'll not be they will not let you to get involved in this, which is something that Samvel Karapetyan was trying to do. And he has finances, which is completely different issue by itself for the autocrat. Why? Because, they can now challenge the huge apparatus that the state has, which is being used for the political gains of the ruling elite. This is one thing. And now, when we're writing about that, we brought explanation, the need for the next elections, consolidation of power as the primary one, because after the last elections, we saw that the support was being decreasing in other communities, including the Yerevan, and civil contract is now having difficult time to gain the sole majority in the other communities, and they are doing recourse to some other means of that, arresting the opposition mayors, forcing them to go to the snap elections, so many tactics they have for that. But the actual reason, I think not the reason, but the actual mechanism is that from 2018, the Nikol Pashinyan was building up his infrastructure of persecution. That's our new word, infrastructure for persecution, what we call it, which includes the mechanism in the judicial system, which would be there would be judges, there would be mechanisms how you can refer these cases to them, which will deliver opinions or decisions more favorable for the ruling party. You should have the law enforcement working in the harmony with this kind these persecutions, and we know who are the chief executives of these enforcement agencies. The prosecutor general is former attaché of Nikol Pashinyan. When she was in the executive, and just in a leap in a day, now she's the prosecutor general. The chief of the investigative committee was her attaché, I think, or how it's called, the assistant. And we don't need to talk about the others, because the others are just basically dependent on the prime minister, even by law, because these first 2 and 3 ones, they should be independent bodies. Of course, there's nothing to talk about that now, because they're trying to cover up for absolutely every misdeed he was doing. The other important part of this infrastructure is how you train everyone involved there to respond when you need them, when you need someone to be prosecuted. And we heard many colleagues were saying, that before, in former times, there were calls from the presidential palace, and the judge would then act accordingly. Now we don't need any calls. They need the judge to have a Facebook account and just to check what the prime minister is writing there every other day. And that's it. They would know what to do. Because with all the instances of this persecution we described in this report, the prime minister was simultaneously, in real time, he was writing basically what should be done. He was writing and coordinating, I would say, the actions of the law enforcement and judicial system. When Samvel Karapetyan was being, his house was being searched, he was being under investigative actions. When Mikayel Ajapahyan was being prosecuted, when people went to the national security went and sacked the Echmiadzin Cathedral, and so on. So this is the infrastructure, and it's up and running now. I think it was the last test to see how far they can push this machine, and I think they got, like, let's say, pretty far. This is for what the domestic issues are, and of course there is also the international ones. The international ones is, of course, the agenda of the so-called peace agenda that Nikol Pashinyan is pursuing, and in that regard, what we're getting into politics a bit. For me, this is, I would say, for him, the paramount is to show so-called partners, international partners, this is the only me who can, get this deal done in the end. So, and those people, from the opposition, if there's any chance they can, topple me, or they can, have a, impact on your plans. So I'm doing in my way, isolating them. And the reason is because you need me to get this deal done, or something like that, let's say. This is why now. This is what we think why now.
Rafael, in the recommendation section of the report, and I just have to say again, this is an exquisite and very good job, and both in terms of the professionalism and the depth that you go into documenting these incidents, including the blow-by-blow response to evidence in the Bagrat Srbazan case, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But in the report, you state, in the recommendation section, you state that months have already passed, and I'm quoting you, months have already passed since the incidents described and the first sentence has been issued. No appropriate assessment of these persecutions has been made by international bodies. End quote. Why?
Yes, yeah, you're right. Why now? This is because they got this open window for that. I think it depends on several factors, and the factors may be different depending on whose persecution we discuss. I think Samvel Karapetyan's case is the easiest one. He is a businessman from Russia. We could have stopped here, because for the current Western international community, this is a big red flag, and that's it. If you are from Russia, you are not, overtly from the, oppositionist. You have some issues. If you have money, you have more issues with that. And if they get persecuted, there are very few people who would like to, get involved in this, because again, for those bodies, issuing a statement, assessing the situation, it already takes some, political resource to do that, because they would be perceived, as intervention into domestic affairs, whatever. So you have very, firm ground for that to assess, and but that it should be on paper and assess, and say that we see some problems here with this trial, with these charges, or we are keeping it under attention, we are disturbed, we are, concerned whatsoever. This is very difficult to do for them, let's say, if they're if there are people which at least they, of course, they understand, but they look into the case, they get this clear absurdity of it. But he is a Russian businessman, so how it should be perceived if we are protecting him from this guy. This is one thing. On the others, for the others, the Bagrat Srbazan's whole struggle movement, I think there's this one thing that they try to accomplish is why they brought the charges of terrorism against the group. And when we were discussing this, one of our colleagues said, well, if you look into the resolution 1900, which states what the Council of Europe considers to be political prisoner, there is a part which says those who were tried and sentenced for terrorist acts, of course, according to the legislation and ECHR case law and so on and so on, that during due process, they cannot be considered as political prisoners. Why? Because, yeah, you can be a political prisoner still if you do something bad, if there's some criminal case that you got some criminal liability, but if you were tried, harsher than the others, it was a discrimination, you can still be considered as political prisoner, except if the charges were for terrorism. So this is the other, the other factor why for many there will be more difficulty, assessing this case is because the charges they brought, they say it involves terrorism.
Never mind that all of these charges, I feel, they're going to be closed because I mean, just looking at your report, you document how absurd that those charges are.
Yes,
but just the fact that they say terrorism, you're saying that it raises the bar for even international organizations in responding to this incident.
I'm thinking this is an effort. They're trying to raise the bar, and maybe some of them will be happy with this high bar because now they're not, forced to respond. But to us, this is not an excuse. You have in the report we stated that this was done on publicly available evidence. Anyone who has some free time, internet, can go and check absolutely every single word and comma in the report. And please do that and come to the other conclusion. Please go and check the recordings, the wiretaps, and please tell me in which part you think this group was planning to use firearms. There is none. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the whole case of several thousand pages, there's no single evidence that this group was planning to use firearms, which is for terrorism. I mean, this is a very necessary thing.
So we'll go into the details of the Holy Struggle case a little bit more, but I want to dive. But I want to sort of sequence things. Let's first talk about the case of Samvel Karapetyan. That's one of the cases that is highlighted in the report. It involves Samvel Karapetyan and people associated with him. What stands out there is not the charges, to me at least, but the collective nature of the response. Supporters were targeted along with the individual through arrests, pressure, and legal action. And let's also remind our listeners that this also involved the seizure of the company that he owned, Electric Networks of Armenia, including forcing him to continue investing into the company, firing every single sort of, non-compliant manager, once they appointed their own manager, and then eventually appropriating the company from him. But going back to the case, the criminal case, Samvel Karapetyan was arrested for saying, quote, "If politicians do not succeed, we will take part in our own way." And the government interprets this as a call to seize power. I mean, am I missing anything? How do the authorities justify treating Karapetyan and his statement as a call to seize power rather than just political rhetoric?
Again, I mean, this is inconceivable. We're thinking about that. Yeah, a guy who has wealth, basically stated that he's going to, participate in domestic politics of the Republic of Armenia. That's it. I mean, that was what this was about. Whatever else, this doesn't to do anything with law and legality, because The same way you can mark, can label any word from any opposition member as a call to seize power. When the opposition says we should no longer tolerate this power, which they said many occasions, what are they doing? They're doing what the oppositionist is doing. What's the goal of opposition? To get to top, to get to the power. That's what the opposition is. And everyone is doing that, let's say, quote, in their own way, of course, in whose way they should be doing that. I don't even think that is worth, discussing, because we're trying to get more credibility. This is just a very plain case of isolating the political opponent. And for Nikol Pashinyan, it was very favorable because he was a Russian-based businessman, and it's very easy in current state of affairs to persecute him. And I think we can close the case just with that. But yeah, you're right. This was more into that, because we see the whole palette of the persecutions against him personally, against the supporters, economic persecutions. Where the first days when Samvel Karapetyan was detained, there were visits from this body which is checking the sort of like a FDA kind of body, which was doing checks in the Tashir
Inspections, yeah,
yes, and turned out that after the arrest of Samvel Karapetyan, the food chain that was belongs to him started to produce bad quality food or something. They closed they suspended the operation of several of the restaurants of this chain.
14, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 14 chains were closed down. Okay, before we move on to the Holy Struggle movement, I just want to reiterate, just 2 days ago, I watched an interview of the lawyers of Samvel Karapetyan, and essentially it's just shocking that they have to talk about new ways that the government sort of crosses every red line. So they had brought in an expert witness who gave the conclusion that Karapetyan's speech was not a call to seize power. And as soon as he did that, the investigators searched his own home. What message does this send to legal experts or anyone who may think of doing their professional duty versus being subservient to the regime?
There's one big underlying systemic issue. I think maybe some people want to be familiar with it, is when we're discussing with our lawyer colleagues. So there's the new criminal procedural code in Armenia. It's few years already. It's in force, and the new one basically it makes easier for the defense. On paper, of course, makes easier for the defense, to produce their own pieces of evidence by asking some experts or specialists in different fields. Because before that, and in reality, even now, this was perceived as the sole, let's say, right of the prosecution or of the judge. This was done on their own motion. So if there is some expertise, if we wanted to be credible, what was the way the defense would file a motion with the prosecution or the judge for them to ask some expert to deliver an opinion on certain questions. Now, on paper, the defense lawyers can do them by themselves. But when we discuss with them, they're saying this is very difficult because, one, the experts don't want to, are very hesitant to, deliver anything to us because it's not sanctioned by the court. So this is the perception that, maybe we're getting into something that we don't want to. There's several expertises which can be done in only one center, and they do not like when the lawyers are approaching them, asking for specific expertise for themselves, not for the judge, but from the proper motion of the defense lawyers. Now, when we have this case, when the linguist's house was searched, and we don't know what was the outcome, but this itself is an intimidating action. I think that it would be even more chilling effect on others. Not me. I mean, everyone thinks about that, and the defense lawyers altogether. That after this incident, there will be very few that will even, agree to provide some expertise on motion of defense which they absolutely have the right to do. But we'll get, this sort of this institute, this reform will not be working at all. So from the perspective of the, fair trial, due process, principles, standards, yeah, this is a clear, that the equality of arms is being, shifted to one point, because if the defense doesn't have the right, if the defense doesn't have the ability to produce their own evidence, we're getting back to the full circle, and you'll be dependent on the readiness of the prosecution of the judge, which sometimes, especially in this kind of cases, of course, will not be friendly, will not be, towards the safeguard of human rights. They will produce their own evidence, asking their own experts, which may be, the conflicting opinions with some things that is as easy as just to get into the dictionary. But it's even funny that we need a linguist expert for someone to understand what it means will take part in our own way. That's what it is.
This expert witness was an expert in linguistics, and he was asked whether in our own way means call to seize power. That's the absurdity that we find ourselves in nowadays.
Yeah. Rafael, when it comes to the Srbazan Baykar, the Holy Struggle movement in 2024 that was led by Archbishop Bagrat Srbazan, you explained the case of the terrorism charges, which were ridiculous, really well. But this was a case where religious motivation and civic activism also intersected, and something appears to have triggered a very forceful reaction on the part of the authorities. What activities or statements by the members of the Holy Struggle movement drew the attention of law enforcement like that?
In the wiretaps, they have, they were planning to start, civic disobedience movement. Basically, it's now declassified, and people that they can read it if they get their hands on. It says basically they were planning how to, restart their street protests and not go through as they label it, through the errors they did last year. That is to have higher level of organization, to have groups which would be acting in coordination with each other. Let's say this one would block that part of the city with the traffic to have the pressure. This part would do this kind of activism and so forth. This is basically discussions for that. As far as I understand, they didn't get to the level of consolidation they wanted to before everything started. I mean, when they got arrested. But there was some discussions they were trying to protest when Nikol Pashinyan was leaving for the discussions, which later became this trip thing. And they were planning to protest in near the airport or somewhere around there, but it never happened. For the timing, this may be many opinions, and I think there are many reasons when it happened. But I think the Samvel Karapetyan's case just was the start, and they couldn't go back after that, because if you're starting with this kind of absurd and blatant persecution, you have to go till the end. You have to erase the arena so no one would take from where they left. And it came in a row with a sequence of several weeks, and you got everyone in prison before they even would try to consolidate their, let's say, opposition efforts. So I think this is for the timing. I think if Samvel Karapetyan's case was not there, maybe they would still continue to wiretap them. If Bagrat Srbazan's movement would start their actions, maybe they would just continue as it was, wiretapping, what they call, and maybe trying to come up with even more, because with even more, let's say, pieces that they later describe as evidence. Because when they needed to the recourse for falsifying this evidence, it shows that they didn't have it. They did it on hurry, because there was probably already the order from above. Now is the time. Take them, get them, arrest them. But by the way, don't have the evidence yet. Make it. Yes, sir.
Rafael, what I really like about your report is you actually print out the transcript of the discussion. You highlight where segments of that discussion were omitted to change the context, or even completely mean something else, change the meaning of the words. And it is for this reason that I urge people to go and just see how absurd the evidence brought against Bagrat Srbazan and his friends is. But all of the Pashinyan supporters, his top lieutenants, are on TV every day saying that Bagrat Srbazan is a terrorist, that those who support him are terrorists. In your opinion, is there any publicly available evidence that you have examined, that you have access to, that supports this accusation?
Absolutely not. And even more, there's a lot of evidence that the Holy Struggle members were clearly denying some tactics which they thought would be, deemed to be violent or maybe, dangerous or maybe criminal. And these are basically tactics which in other countries, other protesters didn't feel, any issues with implementing. For instance, the use of fireworks. There were several, fireworks like this, commercial fireworks that were seized during the searches. So we remember the protests in Tbilisi from last year, when basically some of the protesters were using the fireworks as a weapon directly towards policemen. This is one. In the discussions in the wiretaps of Holy Struggle movement, we see that one of them, which is suggesting such thing, the others are saying no, we should not aim it at police officers, rather to the some glass or some walls or whatever, which is so not to cause harm. So we already have difference. I mean, if it's a terrorist tactic, well, in Georgia, in Serbia, in Los Angeles, everywhere there were terrorist tactics implemented. Yeah, no one says that, no one argues that. There's many pieces of this kind of evidence that, they are clearly denouncing any use of tactics which can be either from the police be interpreted as violence or can make this kind of impression. Just one more quote for them. They're discussing that one of them found this firecracker which resembles a frag grenade. Well, it's basically a children's toy. And they denounced using it because they think this may be interpreted as an actual weapon. So we won't use it. We use this commercially available, very famous types of the fire, because everyone knows what it is, and so on. No, there's no such case, such evidence of terrorism, not in the case file, not in any publicly available material. And this is why we say that when the law enforcement, the investigative committee published the photos of legally owned firearms as evidence, basically this means that if anyone commits or plans or is being suspected in any offense, if they have illegal arms in their house, some weapons which the police knows where they are because it's registered, so you can use it as a supportive evidence for that. What's the logic? They have kitchen knives, maybe try to also use them, try to put them as a part of the evidence. There's absolutely no single thing in all the case file that indicates that they at some moment would plan to use it. Again, you remember this part, this shoot two people under the wall sort of thing. Well, this is where we did a big stop and we get into too much, because we needed to get into the details for people to once and for all know and maybe assess by themselves what it's about. And that's why we included the huge part of the transcript. We have the full recording linked to the report. We even did denoise for some people to be even easier to listen. And I really urge people to go there to listen what was this discussion about and see what was the context of shooting two people. And this had nothing to do with the protests. And what we concluded with that is this kind of private conversation which Bagrat Archbishop and Oanes Avetisian had regarding the capital punishment thing. Just the simple fact of publishing this private conversation is a violation of law from the law enforcement part. This is the blatant violation of privacy. No one should know what I'm discussing in my kitchen with my friend. This is none of the business of anyone.
Well, so I wanted to ask you a question about this. Rafael, you mentioned wiretapping a little bit ago. Is it legal for the government to do such pervasive surveillance on everybody's phone And how are they doing this?
Well, the exact means are, of course, they are classified, but basically they are using several tactics, and this may be wiretapping from the, let's say, spyware. This can be done by bugging something, bugging the premises, the vehicles. They need the court order for any and each of these cases, but this becomes so widespread.
Have you seen any of
Currently
these
in
court
Armenia.
orders?
Yeah, it's a standard piece of paper. There's a handwritten time because sometimes in some cases you see, there was a wiretap, let's say 6:30 in some place, and you see a court order just a 10 or 20 minutes before that, issued before that. And one of our colleagues, Tatevik, mentioned that, sometimes when you look into these court orders, you see the motion from the investigator and the court order. They have the same handwriting. So either the court filled the time necessary for when the order will be, investigator signed the court order. So let's see which one is worse
basically
than
it's
the
a
other.
rubber stamp. The courts are like
Of
rubber
course,
stamping.
absolutely. Yes,
I wonder if
yes.
they're even written out later with all the right dates and everything. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to turn these things around within 20 minutes of the actual wiretapping itself. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So this may be like they are already wiretapping, and when they think, okay, we found something, we may use it, but we didn't have a court order. So yeah,
So
they rubber
is
stamp it
so
with
is it legal for the
retrospective.
government to do
Maybe.
this?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is nothing to talk about legality. If this is the case, again, we have this suspicion because we have supporting evidence that this might be happening, and we are sure this is happening. We need to try to get the, let's say, rubber stamp justification for that. But if this is happening, this is just the next level police state. When if you combine all the surveillance tactics that they have and all the resources they have, recently the biometric remote surveillance came into effect, and now it's up and running, at least in the legal level. If you combine all this, maybe I don't know, there would be a great sequel for these dystopian novels.
Well, I also am interested in knowing if it's the Armenian government that's doing the wiretapping, or if it's somebody else doing it and turning it over to the Armenian government.
I talked to a cyber expert. Yeah, they say that they have the capability. The Armenian government, they already have the capability.
I mean,
Both software and hardware
the
wise.
technology required even for physical wiretapping is not that much. I mean, and that is the cheapest resource, unfortunately, for Armenian law enforcement is the physical people. So you could go inside even someone's home, trespass, and bug the home. I think that the low tech, we should not exclude these low tech solutions being employed, and the technology needed for that is very cheap nowadays. But so
You mean
we
the
think,
little bug in the flower pot?
yeah, you're thinking about Predator, where every compromise
Yes, I
costs
am. I
about
am
twenty
thinking that
thousand
everybody's
dollars.
cell phone is hacked and they're being listened to.
I mean, they don't need to go through that. It's much cheaper for them to assign a human to tail you and to plant your car, with bugs. So, and I honestly believe that this, yes, I mean, they have those
You are
options.
saying that,
Yes.
Hovig, because you yourself have enjoyed that kind of being spied on.
Well, I don't want to say I enjoyed being spied on because I don't know who was whether it was the government or not. But yes, I've actually documented over the last few weeks. I've documented people following and taking my pictures, and I've taken their pictures in return.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For the record, I was
it's a
being
fun game.
facetious.
Yeah, it's a
Go
fun
ahead.
game.
Go ahead.
Anyway, let's move on to the issue of Archbishop Mikayel Ajapahyan. This is the only case where it has reached the stage of a verdict. So the case of Mikhail Ajapahyan brings the issue into the sphere of the Armenian Apostolic Church. We know that currently the Armenian government, the Pashinyan regime, is in a relentless campaign against the church, and I believe that Ajapahyan is the first sort of real case where the issue of church and state are more primary, more in the foreground, and it illustrates that even senior clergy, well respected, charismatic clergy, are not immune when their actions or words clash with state policy. The report suggests that legal pressure in this case served not to address a crime, but to draw boundaries around acceptable religious and public speech. You will go into detail to explain this, but I do want to say that the same thing that Mikayel Ajapahyan was accused and convicted of in 2024, he said the same thing on public TV. And when a complaint was filed about that incident, the investigative body said there is no crime here. So something changed, and for the same thing that he said in 2025, he was tried and convicted to 2 years in prison. What actions or statements by Mikayel Ajapahyan were so offensive and so terrible that they had to lead to a criminal conviction against him?
Yes, you're right. Well, if you think about that he did the same statements before. Well, basically the statements where it comes from, I believe, from his philosophy, let's say, because he was very specific of what was talking, that there is a need for the military coup in Armenia. That was the main idea that Ajapahyan is voicing. And he's explaining in many of the interviews why he thinks that and why this is important. So, okay, back to that. This is a statement which is, for some people, of course, it sounds extreme, yeah. But we're getting sidetracked. We're discussing, is this something that someone voicing about this should be even, charged or even, imprisoned for that? For American listeners, I think there would be quite, again, some surprise, because the speech, protection in US doesn't get into, the content of what the person is saying. It is rather what the secondary effects would be if there's an imminent, threat of breach of peace or something. Because in Ajapahyan's case, there's absolutely nothing about that in the case. He was voicing that several years before being arrested. The same thing. What happened? Did we see any attempt to do that? Any attempt of military coup? Is there any suspects from the armed forces or national security? Maybe, some reservists which may reply to that. There's no one in the case. There's no one in this criminal case that was, suspected of, maybe they will follow the orders, and maybe there was the imminent risk of even trying to, conduct this kind of thing. This is one. The second issue is again, if he was voicing the same ideas years before, this is like, you're committing some act, and you see that people see that what you did. No one says anything. So then you do the same the next year, and then the next year, and then the police says, "Oh, now you did it third time. Now we're going to arrest you because it was a crime initially. So why you didn't stop me? Because if you didn't stop me, for me, there should be the legal certainty principle says I should be, I should anticipate what my actions would bring in the legal, sense. So I was clearly anticipating that nothing will happen, because you saw that, everyone saw that. How come it became crime now? Again, there's no other suspects there. It's just, just the assessment of his speech, absolutely out of any context that he's been sentenced for. And I think this is not only the issue of the free speech standards being violated. This is just absolute violation of the legal certainty principle and many others.
What effect does this kind of messaging have on public trust in human rights institutions, or maybe actually all institutions? Does it degrade public trust in all institutions in the country?
Yes, I think you're right. I think this is the main aim behind what we do. I think this is a very popular modus operandi for the populistic governments. You try to, label everyone, in the same pot, that, there's me and there's all the others. There's no shades in the opposition. Everyone, is somehow in the same, pot, and this is how they want people to perceive them. There's new candidate walking into the political arena. Well, you see, once he had hands with someone who you already know, he's from the ex-president's supporter, so he's not, he's not good, he's not queer, he's a well, it's how they use this word, hybrid, hybrid warfare,
Hybrid
whatever.
warfare.
Yeah, he's a Russian agent, he's the fifth column, he's the Talanchi, he's the corruptionist, well, everything. You can label everyone. If you are using this populistic rhetoric, putting everyone under the same label in the same pot, but the reason? I think the reason is in polls of election polls, we think that most of the people don't go there because most people don't trust the elections, or maybe they don't trust anyone in the political arena. This is the most important demographic. This is on what the opposition is playing on, trying to get new people from there. And this is what the ruling power is doing, trying to get everyone even further from the politics, for everyone to be disgusted with the word politics. As fewer the people go to the polling stations during the next election, the more would be the quota of his supporters, Nikol Pashinyan's supporters, which they believe is the core, let's say, and trying to show everyone who is somehow criticizing the government as the part of this big fifth column KGB agent circle will on their calculations will be alienating these people, the 60% even further, and depriving the opposition of gaining new supporters. And when saying opposition, I mean anyone who made a statement or is planning to make a statement, someone who is new in politics, who is a newcomer, or one of the old politicians. They will not. The reason is try to deprive them of any new votes, any new demographics.
But isn't he going to need to completely flip the story if he ever has a constitutional referendum? He's going to need a lot of people to go to the polls so that he can get some kind of a quorum to change the constitution. But by that time, he has degraded the trust in the electoral system and institutions that people will simply not care to even vote.
I don't remember what's the number required, but it's not very high. I think he's able to do that if he has it on his mind, the constitutional reform. But as far as I understand, this is being planned to do after the election, so maybe it will be simultaneously. We don't know yet.
We don't know.
It's not showing all the cards. Yeah, we don't know it. What I think, I mean, my perception is that he will use it as a pretext to tell people, you have to vote for me to be able to conduct this referendum, for then have the peace agreement, because otherwise war.
Rafael Can, this was a very interesting report from the ACPR, and I urge our viewers and listeners to go to the links. We'll include the link to the show notes under the YouTube description, and you can go and read it for yourself. It is pretty good reading. And before we let you go, I think that we haven't had you on so regularly, or as regularly as we wanted to. So a lot of material has accumulated. But I do want to ask one question about Article 236, because there recently, I believe in November, there was a decision by the Venice Commission on Article 236 of Armenia's Criminal Code. This is the article that criminalizes interference with assemblies, or so-called material incentivizing people to participate in or to stay away from protests. In practice, it has been used far beyond violence or coercion, sweeping up organizers, supporters, and activists. And the Venice Commission just basically warned that the article is too vague and gives authorities excessive discretion, making it incompatible with basic standards of legal certainty and freedom of assembly. The problem is that many opposition members have either been arrested, detained, or even convicted under this article, including Avetik Chalabian, who was detained for 4 months, and he eventually was convicted, although that is being appealed right now. We also know the case of Gerasim Vartanyan, who was detained for 6 months. I believe it was related to giving fuel for protesters to go to, you know, a march. Anyway, I forget about the details about that case. What is the impact of the Venice Commission's decision, and where do we go next?
The Commission issued their opinion on the motion of the Armenian Constitutional Court. They, for their part, they received the request from the parliamentary minority, from the opposition MPs, to look into the issue. Does this, conform with the legal certainty principle or any others? So now it's in the process of the Constitutional Court. They suspended the discussion until the Venice Commission would issue their opinion, and now the Commission issued. And now the Constitutional Court should deliver its opinion, which should be the most important piece. They should decide whether it corresponds to the Constitution or not, in a way it should be decriminalized or not, or on what part. So last time I checked, they didn't deliver the opinion yet. And I think they have some grace period to do that. There's several months. I don't know. I hope they would be, they would be delivered sooner than later. And basically, there are several scenarios possible. One, if the Constitutional Court says, well, yeah, based on the opinion of the Commission, I find this to be, contradicting the Constitution in ways that is not certain, in the way that is very vague, and so and so. Do they have techniques how to write it down? The other way, which is, I don't think it will be the case, but basically the Constitutional Court can say, yeah, okay, I heard the Venice Commission, what they're saying, but I think that it's still okay for us to have something like that, because they're reviewing it against the constitutional clauses. Again, this is very unlikely, but what is likely is if the opinion will be delivered as later as possible. So basically, it may go to pass the pre-election campaign, or even the elections, maybe somehow. I would say maybe we need more time for that. I don't know. We don't know. Anyway, I think it would be very difficult to circumvent the need for decriminalization of this paid protested law, what we call it.
Okay. Again, that Venice Commission report is also linked from our show notes. And with this, I want to thank you, Rafael, for joining us. Please come back more frequently than you have in the past, and let's discuss issues related to human rights in Armenia, because it seems like sometimes we're the only ones talking about it. Even so-called human rights activists are busy filing requests for Pashinyan to arrest people. So I want to thank you and the ACPR for doing the work that you do. And I want to thank our viewers and listeners for staying with us so long.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you too. Thank you, Gospel. Nice to see you.
That's our show today. The episode was recorded on December 14, 2025. We've been talking with Rafael Ishkhanyan, who is a lawyer specializing in human rights, particularly freedom of assembly and expression. He coordinates the monitoring of peaceful assemblies at the Helsinki Committee of Armenia, and he's also a member of the ODIHR panel of experts on freedom of assembly and association. In 2023, together with colleagues, he co-founded the Armenian Center for Political Rights, the ACPR, a watchdog organization focusing on detecting, responding, and preventing political persecution and safeguarding political rights.
Friends, these Spotlight on Silent episodes may not win popularity contests, but they are super important. There is a lot you can do to help, including sharing these with legal experts in the international arena that you think would be interested in this report that we talked about, in the material that we discussed, and so on. And the list of what you can do to support us is to join, like, follow the ACPR page on Facebook. Browse the reports that they've posted and let them know what you think about how important their work is for democracy in Armenia and human rights in Armenia. Again, the ACPR, in my opinion, is one of the few organizations today that is fighting for those rights on a basis of just principle, and not for money. And we have seen that many of these organizations in the past who have pretended to be human rights organizations have just been in it for the money they've been getting from all these three-letter agencies. If you want to find their webpage, you can go to our show notes, podcasts.groom.org/episode number, and we will link the page for the Facebook page for ACPR. And while you're there, you can also consider supporting us and financially, and the link for that is podcast.groom.org/donate. But always, please, at least the minimum, like, comment, share, and make sure you're subscribed to our channels so that we can get out of algorithmic jail. I'm Hovik Mkhitaryan in Yerevan.
I'm Asbet Bedrosian in Los Angeles. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a great day.